Okay, now that you've completed the DNA portion of the class, you'll understand the logic behind collecting DNA on yourself and family relatives. The next thing we're going to do is move into the genealogical proof standard, which comes from this book right here, which is used for board certification of genealogists. You'll see it's called Genealogy Standards. Now, this book is essentially the Bible for genealogists, and it helps you understand logically how you need to collect data. So you've done the DNA portion of the class. That's great. Now we're going to go into collecting data in a way that will stand up to scrutiny, that will lock down for sure your genealogical information and to, whether it's accurate or not. So let's move ahead and find out more. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the overview of the Genealogical Proof Standard, or the GPS. What you're going to see here is the elements of GPS and the contribution to credibility. So what that means is, if you look at the first thing, number one is going to be a reasonably exhaustive search. That means you're going to research out everything you need to know about the individual or individuals you're focusing on. So the contribution to credibility means that it assumes the examination of a wide range of high-quality sources. High-quality sources can be gotten from town halls, it can be gotten from the National Archives, can be military records, that sort of thing is what would be, the assumption would be that you're looking at credible sources, not simply stories that people have told to you. Secondly, it minimizes the probability that undiscovered evidence will overturn a too hasty conclusion. A good example of this would be, let's say in 1850, a woman was pregnant April 15th. And then the census records indicate that possibly she gave birth to a child on April 16th in France of 1850. Well, that would be a problem, wouldn't it? Because the probability that a person in 1850, pregnant today, would give birth in France tomorrow is unlikely. So there's a problem with that source. In the 21st century, it is possible. You could fly from Colorado to France and give birth tomorrow in France. So it minimizes the probability that undiscovered evidence will overturn a too hasty conclusion. Second part is to complete accurate citation to the source or sources of each information item. It means that you have to demonstrate the extent of the search and the quality of the sources. Again, did it come from the National Archives? Did it come from the Bureau of Labor, rather if it came from, let's say, an historic society? It also allows others to replicate the steps taken to the conclusion. Inability to replicate the research casts doubt on the conclusion. So if a third disinterested party follows your logic for finding a piece of information and cannot find it, it makes the information suspect. Third, tests through processes of analysis and correlation all sources, information, and evidence. That means facilitates sound interpretation of the data contributed by each source. Again, using the example of a person in 1850 who was in the United States today and then tomorrow was in France giving birth to a child, would make the analysis of that information suspect. You'd have to look further. It also ensures that the conclusion reflects the evidence. So you're going to be very clear. The next page, or next slide that we go to will show you exactly how to do this. Resolution of conflicts among items, evidence items. For example, lots of times people were named one thing at birth and went through life with a different name, or they were called by a nickname. I can think of many of them now. I can think of one person who was born Seymour Otwell Manning, and when he died, his name was Eugene Seymour Manning, but it's the same person. So you have to substantiate your conclusion's credibility, and then soundly reasoned, coherently written conclusion. That means it eliminates the possibility that the conclusion is based on bias, preconception, or inadequate appreciation of the evidence. What that means is that oftentimes people want a thing to be true, people who are researching, and they have a lot of bias involved. And you have to try to take a look at this from a neutral position. Things may not be as you thought they should be. And it explains how the evidence led to the conclusion. So these are essentially the 5 steps that lead to the next thing that you'll see on this slideshow, the next form, which is also downloadable and you can use it. And I think you'll find that it's very useful. This is an example of the downloadable form. On the top of the form, you'll see that there is this little pink area. Sometimes it's blue if it's a male, sometimes it's pink if it's a female. In this case, the person's name would be typed in here, the person that you're investigating. Down here is the source. So that would be, where did it come from? The National Archives, where did it come from? What is the evidence? Are there siblings or associates, father, mother, or other information that would verify? So this is your genealogical proof standard right here. You want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 or 6 even sources that guarantee that your subject is the information you're gathering is accurate. So let's take a look at that. So here is what that form looks like filled out. In this case, the subject is the evidence for Eva Jane Vandenberg parentage. This is an actual person. So the source, evidence, siblings and associates, father, mother, and any other information. This is going to tell you whether the information on this woman is accurate. So in 1892, there was a New York census for Saratoga Greenfield in New York. It was done on February 16th, 1892. It was the 3rd election district enumerator and the person's name. This actually came from the National Archives. And this can be easily backed up by going to the National Archives. It shows that her father's name is Joseph Vandenberg, age 43, farmer and father. That comes right from the form. And then the mother's name was E. Nettie Vandenberg, age 33. That's the mother. So it names their children or siblings or associates that are on the census form. So in this case, it says Ella, Bertie, Eva, Daisy, and Rose, and indicates that these are all siblings and what their gender is. The father was a U.S. citizen and the mother was a U.S. citizen. That all came from the National Archives. Next, we see more. Application for Social Security account number for Eva Jane Fossauer. So we see, and the word Nee, N-E-E, Vandenberg means maiden name. So we know that Eva Jane, when she died, her last name was Fossauer. And her Social Security application was filled out on May 22nd, 1942. She's listed as unemployed. It gives her address in New Jersey. and how old she is, 58 years old and born April 26th, 1884. She lists her parents as Joseph Vandenberg and Emma Kilmer. Notice that there's a nickname for her mother up here, Nettie, but her first initial is E. So we know Emma Kilmer is probably her mother because Eva Jane wrote all this down on her Social Security form. So that's a second thing that backs up who this person is. Third thing, 1900, 12th Census of the United States for Saratoga Greenfield, June 18, 1900. And then it gives the enumeration and who did it. Next we see as evidence Joseph Vandenberg, date of birth 1849, and his age, and then Nettie Vandenberg again. Over here we also see more family members listed. So since Eva Jane was born, there are more living here. The father is a U.S. citizen, the mother is a U.S. citizen. And here in the column of other, it says the son of Eva Jane may be Willie Knowlton. Currently, family tradition holds this to be her son, still researching. Maybe son of Eldora. So we don't know. All we know is that during this census, there was a Willie Knowlton and grandson of Joseph, and that family tradition indicates that this was Eva's son, but we don't know that for sure. If it was Eva's son, it means that she must have been married before her last name was Vossauer. So now we have a fourth piece of evidence, 1911, Vermont marriage records, Burlington, Vermont, July 3rd, 1911, Eva Jane Vandenberg, Curtis. Well, it looks like that she was married to a Curtis, and she was age 27 years old, and the marriage certificate indicates that she was widowed. Noted on the marriage certificate are Joseph Vandenberg, the father, Glenville, New York, and Nettie Kilmer, mother, Little Grove, New York. So we know that these are the parents of Eva Jane. So we can conclude reasonably at this point, but not for sure, that she has another last name named Curtis. There are no lists for siblings or father or mother citizenship or any other information. So as you can see, evidence for Eva Jane's parentage is clear right through here, through concrete, solid evidence. And each person that you're exploring in your family tree needs to have a form like this filled out. It could be several pages long, because if you researched any of this stuff, took a look at any of this, and tried to replicate this information, it would be replicatable. You would find it somewhere. In this case, the National Archives, it appears, and Social Security Administration, as well as a Vermont marriage record. So as you can see, it's not quite as simple, and it will oftentimes this evidence that you discover is going to be much more interesting than any of the stories that family tells you, although stories are interesting as well, and they too can be noted as evidence in the exploration of a family subject. So this is a downloadable form. I would recommend that you take all of the genealogical information you have on existing relatives, including yourself, and start filling these forms out. Okay, now let's review what you should have done so far. First, you should have started your class with Section 1 on the topic of DNA. You should have joined a genealogy site like Ancestry.com. you should have ordered a DNA kit and submitted a sample of your DNA. You should have downloaded all the forms at the end of Section 1. From there, you should have moved on to Section 2, GPS, the Genealogical Proof Standard. Next, you should have ordered the book Genealogy Standards. Then downloaded and started filling out the forms for the GPS. Good job. Now it's time to move on to Section 3 and archiving.